Hello and welcome to the video. Over the last 4 months I've made 4 trips. I've been from London Heathrow to Corfu, I've been from London Gatwick to Gibraltar, I've been from London Stanstead to Cologne, and I've been from London Gatwick again to Tenerife on British Airways, on EasyJet, on Ryanair and on Wizz Air. In these unprecedented times I thought there'd be value in making a summary video about those experiences. The first video I made, linked above and in the description, looked at the airlines that I'd travelled on. In this video I'll look at the airports I transited through and mention some of the countries that I visited. I sincerely hope that this is the last video I make specifically about this virus, as the vaccines are on the way to save the day and return us to normal. So I hope you enjoy it. Stick around.
Hi, I'm Matt. Over the last 25 years I've travelled a lot. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.3 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So hit subscribe and perhaps you'll pick up some hacks, hints and tips to make your next trip better.
It makes sense to split my experiences of these airports into 2 parts, arrivals and departures, as they were distinctly different experiences. So Heathrow. This was early September and things were very quiet. There was a notice on entry to the terminal and 2 hand sanitising stations that were very easy to miss. The blocking off of certain seats was probably more noticeable. I doubt there's a person in the country, or indeed the world, who is unaware that we're in the midst of a pandemic, and I doubt anyone likely to be travelling through an airport is unaware of the need to wear a mask, to regularly sanitise your hands, or to maintain social distancing. So I don't think it was Heathrow's, or indeed any of the other airports' job to educate their customers on what to do, but perhaps a greater prominence could have been given to these reminders, particularly the hand sanitising stations, which I only noticed when editing this video. I have gold status in the BA Executive Club, so I was able to use the first wing, which is an extremely civilised way of clearing security. The BA First Lounge is more under BA's control than Heathrow's, and I talked about the measures taken there in my video of that flight. Most shops were open and it felt quite normal. Quiet, but normal. My main criticism of Heathrow, when leaving the country at least, was that in trying to solve one problem, they have created a potentially bigger one. Terminal 5 is split into 3 concourses, A with 23 gates, B with 17 and C with 15. With fewer than 100 flights departing that day, all of them could probably have been serviced at the A gates, particularly as BA's A380s have been mothballed. But Heathrow seems to have decided to spread passengers out by not using adjacent gates, which means they have to use the B gates, which means they have to use the intra-concourse tram. This is the single biggest challenge for social distancing in the entire airport. Not too bad when I passed through, although some support in maintaining social distance is the minimum I would have expected. Gatwick has no intra-concourse trains, preferring to send its customers on lengthy marches to distant gates. There is an intra-terminal train connecting the South to the North Terminal, which remains in use as the railway station comes into the South Terminal and all flights operate from the North. Traffic on this intra-terminal train was light. Gatwick had a fairly prominent hand sanitising station after entering the terminal and some additional signage, but didn't exactly overload passengers with warnings. Through security here, there were more hand sanitising stations and most retail was open. No blocking off of seats. Stanstead had some prominent signage on the way into the terminal, although I didn't see any hand sanitising stations either at the time I entered or by scouring my footage subsequently. The terminal was very quiet. After security, more signage. This was followed up by hand sanitising stations provided by the airport and the retailers. Reaching my flight's gate required shoe leather rather than a train transfer, although Stanstead was still using gates requiring transit via a train, which I needed to use on my return. Hold tight for that. So concluding my departures experience, all airports enforced mask use. A few protruding noses if you looked carefully, but generally the single biggest measure to inhibit transmission was very well observed. Decent signage, good opportunities for hand sanitisation, but very, very limited reminders to socially distance. A different story when returning to these airports. Whilst it's still the case that there's probably no one on the planet who doesn't know there's a pandemic on, a large proportion of those arriving into the UK won't know how the UK is handling things. Indeed, when I arrived back from Tenerife, the laws had changed while I was away, so even I didn't know what I should have been doing. All airports were very poor at communicating what was expected of those arriving. Heathrow forced us back to the main terminal on the train, although BA's staggered disembarkation process appears to have spread the passengers out rather, so the train was not full. There is a tunnel that you can use to walk back to passport control, but it was not advertised as an alternative. Another issue that seemed to affect airports concerns the UK passenger locator form required by all arriving passengers. The crew on all my arriving flights made an announcement reminding passengers to complete them. Check out my Ryanair and Wizz Air videos for more on that. But apart from this sign, I didn't notice or hear any other reminders or guidance at Heathrow. Very similar at Stanstead. We parked at a gate that required a train transfer back to passport control. I cover this in detail in my video about that flight, but there was no support provided by Stanstead to maintain social distancing, and it was quite an uncomfortable experience. I was as guilty as everyone else by abandoning social distancing, but you just don't know what planes are arriving and whether the next tram is going to be any less packed. I didn't see any prompts about the locator form either at the time or in reviewing my footage for this video. And once again, I think it would have been possible to get through without completing a locator form. Obviously, the UK authorities could use the airline's records to get in touch with you if needed, but if that is considered an adequate contingency, why make anyone complete a form? I gather from Googling the issue that the passport gates do not cross-reference to the online locator form system, so I think I'm right in saying that there was no check made that passengers had actually completed the form. The single biggest differentiator of any airport I experienced was at Gatwick, where on both occasions I passed through there was a very harassed man checking that locator forms had been completed before allowing people past him. I didn't get it on film, but a large table had been provided with forms and pens for the non-compliant. Good job, Gatwick. I was tempted to not complete a form on one of my return trips, but the rule follower in me is strong and I just couldn't do it, even if it would have been an interesting experiment. Perhaps next time, if we're ever allowed to travel again. So in conclusion, it was a disappointing experience at all three airports when it comes to educating arrivals into the UK as to what was expected of them. The point of arrival seems like a golden opportunity to educate people about restrictions, but it's an opportunity that is being completely missed. Gatwick, though, did their bit to ensure the government at least knew you were in the country. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the countries I visited. None of the foreign airports I transited through made much of an effort to communicate their local restrictions, so maybe the UK isn't that great an outlier, in Europe at least. Germany was particularly bad in that respect, as they have varying federal restrictions, and I really had no idea of what was expected of me in Cologne. I was in Spain for nearly a whole day before I realised that mask use was compulsory everywhere, including outdoors. When it came to locator forms, I was never entirely sure that I needed one for Germany, but I did one anyway. Gibraltar required a paper form and physically collected them before allowing you through customs. Greece appeared to have pushed responsibility for compliance to the airlines bringing people to the border, meaning BA was on the hook and they were appropriately thorough in checking compliance as a result. So if anyone from the British government ever watches this, the three things I would recommend you look at are: push responsibility for the locator form to the airlines. If Greece can do it, failing that, give the airports explicit responsibility and go visit the guys at Gatwick to see how they're doing it. And while we're at it, give the guys doing that job at Gatwick an MBE, because from what I saw, they deserve it. Secondly, work with airports to review their social distancing policies, particularly when it comes to their trains. Using adjacent gates in the same concourse with social distancing prompts is probably a better approach than forcing people to cram into trains. And thirdly, although I've not mentioned it explicitly in this video, Ryanair and Wizz Air both gave false information in their pre-landing public health announcements. Both said we needed to self-isolate for 14 days after arriving, and in both cases that information was wrong. This is inexcusable and needs to be fixed. So thanks for watching. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it or if you got something out of it. Please leave me a comment, I would love to hear from you. And also subscribe. Still about 70% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed to the channel, and by not subscribing you're missing out on my other great content. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again soon. Goodbye.